Have you ever wondered why flight attendants give the kind of customer service that they give? Have you actually ever thought about the kind of things they must see and experience on a daily basis with hundreds of passengers in their plane, giving them a hard time, being demanding, having problems with their travel, and yet they're still supposed to turn around and deliver excellent customer service? In today's video, I'm going to be dishing on 5 stories that affected my customer service and actually made me better. They made me a better flight attendant. They made me better at customer service. They made me just a better person. Some of them were awful stories, and you might judge me, but all of them touched me or impacted me in some type of way. So let's get this started with what I call the overhead bin dilemma. The overhead bin dilemma. I've been in market research for the last 20 years, but about 8 years ago, I decided to become a flight attendant also. And the planes that I fly are generally smaller planes. My favorite plane was the Embraer 145, which basically has 13 overhead bins for 50 people. Because of the bin size, the FAA made it a regulation that we were not allowed to take rollerboard bags onto the plane and to put in the overhead bin. But it fit anyway, and it always amazed me how many people would argue with me when I would say no, and I would not let them bring the bag into the plane. I tried everything. I would tell them that I would get fired. They didn't care. I would tell them it was an FAA violation. They didn't care. I would try a bunch of different things. And eventually, what ended up working on that particular plane was for me to point out that we only had 13 bins for 50 people. If I let them bring their bag on, then that bag would take up the space of 2 bags, and therefore we wouldn't have enough room for everybody's bags. That seemed to satisfy people. People will often argue with you and fight with you because they have an idea of what they want to do when they enter your establishment, and if you're not cooperating with them, they're going to argue with you. So generally what I would do is I would flip it on them and I would put it on them. I don't fly the 145s anymore. Our company got rid of them all. We fly the 175s. With the 175s, you are allowed to bring the rollerboard bags onto the plane, and they do fit in the overhead bin. A lot of times their bags are too big to go in the overhead bin. We would try arguing with them all the time and say, you can't fit your bag in the overhead bin, and they would immediately argue with us and say, it'll fit. It fit on the way there, it's gonna fit on the way back, it'll fit. And you're just like, I said no! And doing that does not work. So finally, I figured out if it's about inconveniencing them, there's one thing that I could definitely say that works. And that is, hey, if you break that overhead bin, it's an 1.5 hour delay. Just saying that made them look at the situation in a whole new light, and pretty much 90% of the time, they will stop trying to shove that bag in the overhead bin, and they will listen to me and cooperate with what I have to say. The lesson I learned from this is that the more that customers think that what they're demanding is going to actually be inconvenient for them, the faster they will back down about arguing with you head on. If you make it about them, if you make it inconvenient to them, they will back down. So the best thing I can suggest to you for customer service when dealing with terrible customers is to have some comebacks prepared. I truly believe that no matter what business you're in, you're gonna hear the same complaint over and over again. Customers will find something to complain about, even if you've got it perfected. So if you can have comebacks that basically make it inconvenient to them, I believe they're more likely to back down. The girl with the blue flower. This next story is the story I call the girl with the blue flower. And it's actually one of my favorite stories. When I was on the 145, one of my favorite things to do was try to memorize the manifest of every passenger on my plane. And usually I would have 50 passengers max. So for every flight, I would try to memorize all 50 names because I just thought it was fun. When I would do the service, I would go down and I would try to greet each person, Mr., Miss, Mr., Miss. I remember coming to seat 13C, and in 13C, there was a woman by the name of Miss Barton. And Miss Barton had 2 seats to herself. She was a very sweet young girl. And I looked at her and I had seen that her last name was the same as mine. I said, oh, you're Barton too. It's so nice to meet you, Miss Barton. Can I get you a drink? She was dumbfounded that I had said her name. And it was just normal customer service for me. This is just how I did it every single day. I didn't even stop to chat with her or anything. I just continued on with my service. I finished, I stashed stuff, got ready for landing because it was a short flight. And when this girl got off the plane, she came up to me and she handed me a blue flower that had been crocheted. She gave me this really beautiful blue flower, and she had tears in her eyes. And she said to me that nobody had been so nice to her ever, and nobody had made her feel as special as I had made her feel. She thanked me for that, and she got off the plane, and I honestly felt ashamed. You heard me right, I felt ashamed. And the reason I felt ashamed is because I hadn't done anything special for her. When she did that, when she gave me that flower, I thought to myself, man, I wish I had talked to her for even just a minute or two more. Because if just saying her name was that special to her, I could have done even more by just asking her anything about her life. And so the lesson that I learned from the girl with the blue flower is that if you use somebody's name when you're doing customer service, you give them a whole new personal experience that they may have never experienced before. You may be thinking, but I don't actually know their name. I don't have a manifest. True, but if they hand you a credit card, their name is on the credit card. And you can use that credit card to actually say their name. And then you give them a whole new level of personal experience that they're going to remember you for. And you'd be surprised how many people it actually touches. People loved it when I did that. The 6-year-old I almost handcuffed. This next story is going to make me sound like a complete monster, but this story taught me something about races. Again, this story starts with me being on the 145. I'm the only flight attendant, 50 seats. My plane is packed, and we have 51 passengers, not 50. The reason I say we have 51 passengers is because there is a woman holding a baby on her lap. Now, on this particular day, I had a group of about 10 people from the same family get on my plane, and they are all Arabic. They all have their head covered, and it's 3 moms and all of their kids. One of the moms had a baby, and she was holding a baby on her lap, and she had a little girl that was about 6 years old. Well, these 3 moms decided that all of the kids should sit together in the back, and 2 of the moms basically took over watching all of the kids, while the other mom had to sit in the last and only seat that was way up in the front in row 6, and she took the baby with her. Basically, the way the Embraer 145 is there's one seat, 6A, on one side, and then on the other side there's 2 seats, B and C. So she's sitting there with the baby, and her 6-year-old daughter, who's in the back during the flight, starts to throw a royal fit. She wants to be near her mom. So, trying to accommodate them, I asked the guy in 6A, would you mind swapping with her? She's in 13A, so you'd still be in this seat where you have nobody next to you. You would just be farther back. Would that be okay? He said, yeah, no problem. So the 2 of them switched, and now the girl is in 6A. And this little girl is kind of a booger. Throughout the flight, she's being demanding. The mom's holding the baby. She can't do anything. We end up landing. And as we land, I pick up the phone and I'm doing the PA, welcome to Chicago, and I'm saying all the things that I'm supposed to say when this little girl jumps up and starts walking to the back of the plane as we're taxiing. And I'm like, you need to sit down right now. She comes back, she sits down, and then she decides, no, I'm gonna go back there. And she gets up and she walks to the back again, and I'm like, oh, hell no. And I hang the phone up, I go down, I get her, I bring her back to the seat, sit her down, and I kneel in front of her and I say, look, the rules of this plane are that you stay in your seat or I have to handcuff you. Do you want me to get the handcuffs out? She was like, no. And I was like, okay, buckle up, stay seated. So after sitting that little girl down, I went back up and I finished doing my PAs, and I sat there and I basically evil-eyed her through the rest of the flight. I never ever would have thought that I would ever say that to a child. I've never done it before. I haven't done it since. But what I learned that day was how different parenting techniques are for the different races. Now, this part is just a theory. This is what I've noticed when flying with different cultures. It seems to me that Arabic women will discipline their daughters, but they don't necessarily discipline their sons. It seems to me that it's the fathers who bring in the discipline. But I have noticed flight after flight that a lot of times if Arabic women are flying with their children alone, the children really act out, and a lot of moms appreciate it when I step in and lay down the law. And it wasn't just that one little girl in that group of 10 that made me come to that conclusion. But after that incident, I really started paying attention to parents that traveled with their children. I started to realize that different cultures not only had different parenting techniques, but they actually had different preferences in snacks. We have 2 snacks. We have cinnamon cookies and we have pretzels. And that's it. As for drinks, we usually have sodas, juices, water. Alcohol, we have wine and beer. I've noticed different things. When we're going to Canada, the Canadians generally prefer juice and wine. When I'm flying in general, I find that people from warmer countries like India or the Middle East, they tend to prefer room temperature water. They don't want ice in their drinks. And they usually go for more savory snacks like pretzels. Whereas Black Americans from the South especially seem to like the sweeter treats. They usually go for the ginger ale and the Sprite, and they often ask me for 7-Up, which we don't have. They will also ask for apple juice or cran apple juice. And they like the cookies with it. And a lot of times they like a lot of cookies. I find Asian cultures also tend to go for the healthier stuff. They usually go for pretzels and water with no ice. So I started noticing these things. And that's why I believe race is truly important when it comes to customer service. If you can tailor it to their particular culture, you make a bigger impact on them. If you keep that in mind when you're dealing with your customers and you start to learn the cultures and people in your area, and if you can cater to them, you actually make the experience more special for them. The prisoner. The next story I want to tell you about is one I call the prisoner. Again, I'm on the 145. I'm the only flight attendant, and I'm doing my service. And as the service is coming to a close, I come back to the end of the plane. There is a girl, and she looks like she's about to start crying. And me, I can't resist a story, first of all, but I really don't want to have a passenger on my plane who I feel is having a bad experience. I put the card away, I came back, and I just sat down on the arm across the aisle from her. I said, "Is there anything I can help you with?" And she was like, "No, I'm fine." But I could tell she wasn't fine. So I said, "Are you sure? Because you seem kind of upset." And she told me, "I'm actually on my way to jail right now." And I was like, "What?" She told me a story about how her boyfriend set her up, and it basically blew up in her face, and she had gone to court. She had tried to defend herself, but it had failed. And now she was on her way back to another state where she had to go to jail for 2 months. As I was talking to her, the only thing I could think to say was, "You know what? I'm proud of you." As crazy as that sounds, I'm proud of you because you are facing up to this. This is only 2 months of your life, and it's going to be done. Instead of running away from it your whole life and having it hanging over your head, you're facing it head on, and you should be proud of yourself. Don't be scared of this. Just keep telling yourself it's only 2 months. And she got off the plane feeling better. She gave me a hug on the way out, and I never saw her again. I don't know what happened to her. Most of the time, you never know what happens to passengers once they're gone. But I know that I made a difference that day. And I have seen many times over the years when somebody is upset, just taking a moment to say, "You look like you're upset. Can I help you with something?" goes so far. It turns the day around for them. Pretty much 98% of the time, I would say, just asking, "Can I help you with something? You look like you're upset about something." And then just letting them talk, it releases the steam valve just like on an Instant Pot. It just lets it all out. And when they're done, they feel better. I would say the lesson that I learned from the prisoner is that listening for even 2, 3, 4 minutes can make a huge difference in the impact that you make on the customers that are standing in front of you. The Jewish wedding party. My last story is a story that happened this last year, and it was kind of funny. I call it the Jewish wedding party. The reason I call it the Jewish wedding party is because this particular day I was on reserve, which means I stand by at the airport, and if somebody doesn't show up for a flight, they send me to do the flight. I get staffed to do flight attendant position number 1, which means I'm doing first class. I'm greeting everybody as they come in the door. And the other person in the back, the number 2 flight attendant, she was brand new. She'd only been there 2 weeks. Anyway, as we're boarding, I'm starting to notice that there's a lot of men getting on the plane with the, I think it's called the yarmulke on the back of their head. And I'm thinking, this is interesting. Basically, there were 15 Jewish people that got on our plane that day, and they were going to a wedding. 15 Jewish wedding guests on our plane, having a good time. I don't know if they're family reunion, if they're friend reunion. They all know each other. Half of them are in my first class, and the other half are in the back in main cabin extra, so they're still close to me, and they're just having a blast. They're talking to each other across the aisle. When I come through the cabin, they're like, "Hey," and they're chatting with me, and I'm having a good time with them. I'm joking around with them. They had me going so much that I'm joking around on the PA. I'm making cracks. I'm going through the cabin. I'm with the other passengers. I'm like, "What's up? How's it going?" I'm joking with all of the passengers at this point. The other flight attendant, she's picking up on my vibe. So she's having a good time too, even though she's totally nervous because this is only her second week as a flight attendant. She helped me. I helped her. We had a great flight. Everybody was laughing. At one point, the pilots turned off the fasten seatbelt signs, and 2 of the passengers got up and went and stood by row 4 to talk to the guy in 4A. Now, they weren't blocking the aisle, and the seatbelt sign was off. All of the people around them were basically from the same party, so I didn't feel like I needed to make them sit down because nobody complained at all. So I just let them stand and talk, and eventually the pilot flipped on the seatbelt sign. They went and sat down. Everything quieted down. It was a great flight, and it was only like 45 minutes. The other flight attendant came to my first class, and there was a passenger. She asked, "Can I refill your drink?" And this passenger went off on her. This was while the other passengers were standing up talking. This lady was in row 3. I didn't know about it. I didn't hear about it, but she came up and she told me, "Your passenger in 3F is really pissed, blah, blah, blah." Told me the mean things that she said to the girl who's not her flight attendant. Then I said, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it." And I sent her back. Mind you, through this whole thing, her cup was never empty, ever. I constantly checked in with her. I constantly asked her if she needed anything else. I made sure I was always available if she needed me. She never said anything. As she was getting off the plane, I did what I had learned before, just offer an opportunity for her to vent. And I said, the other flight attendant told me you weren't happy about the experience. I apologize for that. And she went off on me. She totally went off on me as people were getting off the plane. Then once she was done, she obviously seemed happier and she went on her way out the jet bridge. Whereas other people that had heard her were like, don't listen to her. You're amazing. This was the best flight ever. And somebody else from the back came up to me and they had tears in their eyes. And they said, I'm going to a funeral right now. This was the best flight I've ever been on. You guys made me laugh so much and I needed that so much. And I just wanted to thank you for making the flight the way that you made it. I was just like, oh, thank you. That's so good to hear. If you wouldn't mind writing a letter, because I got this one lady in my section who super pissed, and she just kind of laughed. I always joke with passengers like that. I always try to use humor. It's always my goal that anybody that walks out the door of my plane has a smile on their face, that their day has been turned around. And obviously there's always that one person that humor never works with, but more often than not, it makes your customers super happy. So what I learned from that Jewish wedding party was be yourself, have fun, use humor, because you never know who on the plane is going to a funeral. Question of the day. So those are my stories that helped teach me about customer service and just being a better human in general. If you liked it and would like to see me share more flight attendant stories, go ahead and hit that like button for me. So then that way I know if I should do this series again, because I have so many stories, like shocking stories, funny stories, crazy stories about being a flight attendant. And of course I can definitely relate it to business. If you do know a business owner who needs this kind of advice or you think would be impacted by this kind of advice, please feel free to send it to them. In the meantime, the question of the day today is, have you ever been the bad customer? Know when you've been a bad customer and somebody turned it around for you. What did they do for you that made things so much better? And you may be thinking, I've never done that ever. Okay, well, have you ever traveled and you've had a bad day and maybe the gate agent turned it around for you? Gate agents are phenomenal at turning days around for passengers. There are times where things are just out of your control. If you have a story like that too, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear it. If you would like to hear more stories about being a flight attendant and how it relates to customer service, or if you just want more business tips about how to turn your business around and make it thrive instead of survive, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Today is day 29 of my 30-day YouTube challenge. Tomorrow is the last day, and I'm so relieved. After that, I'm gonna take a couple days off because I've been up every single night editing till really early in the morning. And tomorrow I'm gonna tell the story of what the last 30 days have been like. If that interests you, come back tomorrow and check that out. Anyway, see you guys in the next video. Ciao!